The rules were made to be broken. Dr. Silak Trev stood at the observation deck of the galactic research vessel Enlightenment, his forearms crossed in what his species considered a gesture of supreme annoyance. The blue-tinted holographic display showed yet another primitive nuclear explosion from the third planet of this unremarkable yellow star. This was the 47th such detonation his team had recorded in the past local solar rotation. They're going to destroy themselves before we even get a chance to study them properly, he muttered, his secondary voice box producing a series of clicks that indicated deep frustration. His research assistant, lab technician, Riza Parr, floated nearby, her anti-gravity harness humming softly. Actually, Dr. Riza said, pulling up a detailed analysis on her data pad. According to our psychological modeling, these explosions appear to be deliberate tests. They are not accidents. Zilak's upper left eye ridge twitched. Tests? You mean to tell me they are intentionally splitting atoms just to see what happens? That is like a child playing with plasma cutters. That would be an apt comparison, sir, if the child had somehow managed to figure out plasma cutting technology while still eating dirt, Riza replied, her face tentacles curling in amusement. The Enlightenment had been observing Earth for precisely one standard galactic year, collecting data on what the crew had initially classified as a pre-spacefaring civilization of bipedal primates. Their mission was simple: document the development of another potentially sentient species and determine if they were ready for contact. Standard procedure, nothing exciting, except these humans kept doing the most bizarre things. Pull up the primary assessment report, Zilak ordered, floating over to his workstation. The holographic display shifted, showing a comprehensive analysis of human civilization. Species, humans. Self-designation, Homo sapiens. Threat level, minimal. Technological advancement, early atomic age. Notable characteristics, prone to creating explosions. Inexplicable attachment to non-sentient furry quadrupeds. Surprising resistance to caffeinated beverages. See? Zilak gestured at the display with his lower arms, while his upper ones input commands. A minimal threat level. They spend most of their time arguing about invisible territorial lines and watching moving pictures of other humans pretending to be different humans. The most dangerous thing about them is their complete disregard for basic safety protocols. A soft alarm chimed through the observation deck. Riza quickly pulled up a new data stream, her face tentacles straightening in surprise. "Doctor, you might want to see this. They just detonated something different." The display shifted to show a massive mushroom cloud rising over a remote island. The energy readings were off the charts, far beyond anything they had recorded before. "Well," Zilak said after a long moment of silence, "that is concerning. Update the threat assessment to notable potential for accidental self-destruction, sir," Riza said, her voice unusually hesitant. According to these readings, this was not an accident either. The blast pattern suggests a carefully calculated yield. They knew exactly what they were doing. Zilak felt all four of his arms go slack. He stared at the display, watching the massive cloud of destruction rise into Earth's atmosphere. These supposedly primitive primates had not only mastered atomic fission, but were now apparently playing with fusion, and they were doing it on purpose. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should reconsider our initial assessment. Riza, prepare a report for Central Command. I believe it is time we took a closer look at these humans." As he watched the mushroom cloud dissipate, Zilak couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something fundamental about this species. No truly primitive race could be this casual about splitting atoms. It was like watching a toddler solve quantum equations while still learning to walk. The threat assessment indicator blinked, waiting for his input. After a moment's hesitation, he changed it from minimal to under review. Something told him they were about to discover that these humans were far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. The Central Command's response to Zilak's report arrived faster than a quantum transmission had any right to travel. That alone should have been his first warning. They are sending a diplomatic team. Zilak's face tentacles writhed in disbelief as he read the message. We have not even established proper first contact protocols. Chief Cultural Analyst Nix Vaughn recently arrived from Central Command, blinked all three of her eyes in sequence. The committee believes your discovery of their nuclear capabilities warrants immediate attention. We cannot risk them achieving interstellar travel while still harboring such destructive tendencies. The diplomatic vessel, Unity, arrived 2 solar rotations later, carrying what Zilak considered far too many high-ranking officials for a simple first contact mission. Ambassador Zara Lux swept onto the Enlightenment's command deck in a shimmer of ceremonial robes, followed by a retinue of advisors, security personnel, and one very nervous-looking protocol specialist. Dr. Trev, Ambassador Lux extended her primary greeting appendage. Your reports about these humans are fascinating. Tell me, have you decoded more of their entertainment broadcasts? Zilak exchanged a concerned look with Ryza. Yes, Ambassador, though I must warn you, their concept of entertainment is rather unusual. Wonderful. The Ambassador's skin shifted to a pleased shade of purple. We must understand their culture before making contact. Show me everything. The next 12 hours were spent in the ship's cultural analysis lab, watching what humans called television. The diplomatic team's reaction ranged from horror to bewilderment to unexpected amusement. Let me understand this correctly, Ambassador Lux said, gesturing at the screen with 2 of her appendages. This program, called reality TV, is neither real nor transmitted through traditional television frequencies. And these cooking competitions, added Security Chief Dex Crawl, they deliberately imposed time constraints to make food preparation more difficult. What possible purpose does that serve? Zilak sighed. We believe it is meant to be entertaining. Humans appear to derive pleasure from artificial stress scenarios. Fascinating. The protocol specialist, Mira Tell, was taking rapid notes. And have you analyzed their formal greeting ceremonies? Riza brought up another data stream. They have multiple greeting protocols depending on region, relationship status, and time of day. The most common involves pressing together their upper appendages and moving them up and down. How unhygienic, Ambassador Lux remarked. Surely they have developed better methods of acknowledging each other's existence. Some groups press their facial features together, Zilak added helpfully. The entire diplomatic team recoiled in unified disgust. Perhaps we should focus on the military aspect, Security Chief Crawl suggested, his protective scales bristling. These humans seem oddly preoccupied with weapons development. The ambassador nodded, her color shifting to a more serious blue. Agreed. Have you arranged contact with their military leadership? Zilak brought up a global map. We have identified several major military installations. However, there seems to be no unified planetary defense force. Each region maintains its own military, often with competing interests. They point weapons at each other. Chief Crawl's scales rattled in disbelief, while simultaneously developing nuclear capabilities. Indeed, Nix Vaughn interjected, and yet they have not destroyed themselves. Most puzzling. Ambassador Lux floated thoughtfully. We need to understand their military philosophy. Arrange a meeting with representatives from their most advanced fighting force. After much analysis of Earth's military structures, they selected a facility called Camp Pendleton for their first contact. The humans there seemed to specialize in something called the Marine Corps, which their entertainment broadcasts often portrayed with particular respect. Remember Ambassador Lux addressed the assembled team. We must appear non-threatening while simultaneously ensuring they understand our technological superiority. We cannot risk them attempting any aggressive actions. Should we demonstrate our ship's defensive capabilities? Chief Kroll suggested. Absolutely not, Zilak interjected. These humans detonate nuclear devices as experiments. Who knows how they might interpret a show of force? The ambassador's skin rippled with concern. Agreed. We will approach this diplomatically. Prepare the first contact protocols. And someone please explain to me again why they wear those small strips of colored fabric on their uniforms? As the team prepared for their historic meeting, Zilak could not shake the feeling that they were still missing something crucial about these humans. Any species that could simultaneously maintain multiple competing military forces while developing nuclear weapons had to be operating on a level of complexity they had not yet grasped. Dr. Riza interrupted his thoughts. The human representatives have agreed to the meeting. They are sending something called a Master Sergeant as their primary contact. Excellent, Ambassador Lux said. What exactly is a Master Sergeant? Nobody had an answer to that question. Somehow, that seemed perfectly fitting for everything they had learned about humans so far. The first thing Master Sergeant Kate Stone did upon entering the conference room was offer them coffee. The alien delegation stared at the dark liquid with a mixture of curiosity and terror, having thoroughly researched this particular human stimulant. You willingly consume this? Ambassador Lux asked, her skin shifting to a concerned yellow as she examined the steaming cup. 3 times a day, minimum, Sergeant Stone replied with a grin. She was shorter than they had expected for a human warrior, but carried herself with an air of absolute confidence that made even Security Chief Kroll's scales twitch nervously. And it does not cause severe neurological disruption? Zilak couldn't help asking. Their studies had shown that caffeine should be toxic to most carbon-based life forms in such concentrations. Only if I do not have it, Stone laughed, taking a long sip. So you folks want to know about the Marine Corps? Ambassador Lux straightened her ceremonial robes. Yes, we are particularly interested in understanding human military philosophy and capabilities. Well, Stone set down her cup. First thing you should know is that Marines are the best of the best. Navy has the ships, Army has the numbers, Air Force has the toys. But Marines, we make do with what we have and still get the job done. Make do. Protocol specialist Mira Telst. Translator struggled with the concept. You know, improvise, adapt, overcome. Take whatever is available and turn it into a solution. Sometimes that solution involves higher explosives, but hey, that is what makes it fun. The entire alien delegation shifted uncomfortably. Zilak noticed Chief Kroll discreetly activating his personal shield. And this is considered normal military doctrine? Ambassador Lux asked carefully. Normal, Stone snorted. Nothing about the course is normal. That is kind of our thing. You should hear about the time during World War II when Marines used coconuts as hand grenades during training because they ran out of the real ones. You simulated weapons with plant life? Nix Vaughn looked fascinated. For training purposes, sure. If it is roughly the right shape and weight, it works. Marines have been making do since 1775. Did you know during the Revolutionary War we did not even have proper uniforms? Had to take them from the British after we beat them. You took equipment from defeated enemies. Chief Crawl's scales were now fully extended in alarm. It is called scavenging, and it is a proud military tradition. Stone said proudly, winning is not just about who has the best weapons. It is about who can adapt faster, think quicker, and be more creative with what they have got. Zilak felt his face tentacles curl in revelation. Is this why your species maintains multiple competing military forces? To encourage tactical innovation? Not exactly, though the inter-service rivalry does keep everyone on their toes. Speaking of which, never ask a Marine about the time we stole an army tank. That story is classified, and I definitely was not involved. Ambassador Lux's skin had shifted to a concerning shade of gray. You steal weapons from your own allies? Borrowed. Stone corrected with a wink. We borrowed it temporarily, and if Army wanted to keep their tank, they should have posted better guards. The protocol specialist was frantically taking notes. This contradicts all our studies of organized military structures. How can an effective fighting force operate with such chaos? Stone leaned back in her chair, a glint in her eye that made the entire alien delegation nervous. See, that is where you are making a mistake. You are thinking about warfare like it is some sort of science. But humans, we turned war into an art form. An art form, Zilak repeated weakly. Absolutely. Sure, we have got rules and regulations now, but at its core, warfare is about creativity, innovation, looking at a problem and finding the solution nobody else thought of. Sometimes that solution is elegant and sophisticated. Sometimes it is duct tape and determination. Duct tape. The translator struggled again. Universal repair tool holds the universe together, but that is beside the point. You want to understand human military philosophy? Here it is. We will use whatever works. Period. That is why they had to make rules about what we cannot do in warfare. Because if they did not specifically prohibit it, some Marine somewhere would try it. The room fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. Are you saying, Ambassador Lux began carefully, that your species needed to be explicitly told what methods of warfare were unacceptable? Rules of war, Stone nodded sagely. Geneva Convention stuff. Had to write them all down because, well, let us say humans can get pretty creative when they need to win. Zilak watched in fascination as the entire diplomatic team's complexions shifted to various shades of distress. They had thought these humans were primitive because they still fought among themselves. Now he was beginning to wonder if perhaps they fought among themselves because they were too creative not to. But that is just scratching the surface, Stone continued, reaching for the coffee pot. Want to hear about the time Marines fought off Japanese tanks with improvised Molotov cocktails during the Battle of Henderson Field? Now that is a story about innovation under pressure. The security chief's personal shield hummed louder. The ambassador's skin had gone almost transparent. And Zilak, he was starting to understand why humans had needed to invent rules for warfare. They had not been studying a primitive species at all. They had been studying something far more interesting and potentially terrifying. Sergeant Stone pulled up a series of historical images on the conference room's display screen. The alien delegation watched with growing unease as she began her presentation. So you want to understand human warfare? Let us start with World War I. See, everyone thinks tanks and planes changed everything. But the real innovation, barbed wire. A simple metal barrier. Security Chief Kroll's scales flexed in confusion. Simple but effective, Stone nodded. Cheap to produce, Easy to deploy, nearly impossible to cross under fire. Changed the entire face of ground combat. But then we figured out tanks, and suddenly we needed new solutions. Ambassador Lux's skin rippled with interest, despite her obvious discomfort. You developed countermeasures. Better we started putting weird stuff on tanks. Concrete, spare tracks, sandbags, whatever worked. Germans put wire mesh on their tanks to defeat magnetic mines. British stuck wood planks on theirs to defeat shaped charges. Not exactly factory standard, but it kept people alive. Sci-Fi noticed Reiser frantically updating their threat assessment database. This pattern of improvised adaptation appears consistent across your history. Stone grinned. You have no idea. During World War II, the British wanted to make an aircraft carrier out of ice and sawdust. Project Habakkuk totally would have worked too, except the war ended before they could build it. An aquatic vessel made of frozen water. Protocol specialist Miratel's tentacles twisted in confusion. And sawdust, Stone corrected. The sawdust made it stronger. They called it pykrete. You could shoot it with a bullet, and it would not crack. Unlike regular ice, the entire delegation stared at her. Finally, Chief Kroll spoke. You tested this by shooting it. How else would you test it? Stone shrugged. But that is nothing. Wait until you hear about the bat bombs. The what Ambassador Lux's skin had taken on a fascinating new shade of purple-green. Bat bombs. Plan was to strap tiny incendiary devices to bats, drop them over Japanese cities. The bats would roost in buildings, then the timers would go off. Instant widespread fire damage. Totally would have worked too. Your species, Nix Vaughn said slowly, attempted to weaponize small flying mammals. Attempted. We succeeded. The test bats escaped and burned down a military base. That is how we knew it would work. But then we finished the atomic bomb, so the bat plan got shelved. Sci-Fi watched in fascination as the security chief's personal shield began to emit a high-pitched whine from overuse. But here is where it gets really interesting, Stone continued, seemingly oblivious to the aliens' growing horror. During the Cold War, we got creative. Ever hear of Project Plowshare? The delegation shook their heads in unison. We decided to find peaceful uses for nuclear weapons, like using them for excavation. Wanted to create a new Panama Canal with nukes. Called it Operation Chariot. You wish to use atomic weapons for construction? Ambassador Lux's voice had risen several octaves. Why dig with shovels when you can dig with nukes? Stone said cheerfully. We also looked into using them to stimulate natural gas production. Project Gas Buggy. Not one of our better ideas. Turns out people do not like radioactive natural gas. Who knew? Sci-Fi felt his face tentacles go numb. Your species attempted to use atomic weapons for civil engineering projects? Hey, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if all you have is nuclear weapons, Stone trailed off with a shrug. But that is ancient history. Want to hear about the modern stuff? Like how we turned dolphins into undersea commandos? The security chief's shield finally overloaded with a soft pop. Nobody seemed to notice. We have also got these new autonomous drones, Stone continued enthusiastically. Some genius figured out we could use them in swarms, like robot bees. Program them with basic group behaviors. Let them figure out the details themselves. Pretty neat, right? You give artificial intelligence control of weapons. Nix Vaughn's third eye had started twitching. Not full control. They just have certain parameters they can work within, like real bees, but with explosives. Ambassador Lux had gone completely transparent, a sign of extreme distress in her species. Sergeant Stone, Are you saying that your species routinely takes existing concepts, technologies, or even living creatures and finds ways to make them more lethal? More effective, Stone corrected. Lethality is just a bonus. Take the Navy SEALs, for example. Somebody looked at Special Forces and thought, you know what would make these guys better? If they could fight underwater like sea lions. So they trained them to do that. Your naval forces emulate aquatic mammals? Chief Kroll had given up on his shield and was now simply trembling slightly. Among other things, they also jump out of perfectly good airplanes, fight in Arctic conditions, and conduct underwater demolitions. Because why be good at one type of warfare when you can be good at all of them? Silak noticed Reiser had stopped taking notes and was simply staring at Stone with a mixture of awe and terror. He understood the feeling. But here is the really fun part. Stone leaned forward conspiratorially. Everything I have told you, that is just the stuff that worked well enough to make it into the history books. You should see some of the ideas that did not pan out. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ventilation system and the quiet whimper from the protocol specialist's direction. There were more ideas. Ambassador Lux managed to ask. So many more. Project Pigeon, Project X-Ray, the gay bomb, the chicken gun. Human history is basically just us coming up with increasingly weird ways to fight each other. Some work, some do not. But we never stop trying new things. Silak finally found his voice. And your species considers this normal? Normal? Stone laughed. No way. But effective. Absolutely. When the fate of your nation, your people, or your planet is on the line, you try everything. And I mean everything. Because you never know what might work until you try it. The alien delegation exchanged looks of dawning comprehension. They had assumed humanity's fractured military structure and seemingly chaotic approach to warfare were signs of primitiveness. Now they were beginning to understand it was exactly the opposite. These humans had not developed rules of warfare because they were civilized. They had developed rules of warfare because they were too good at finding new ways to fight. Sergeant Stone took another sip of coffee before continuing. So, about those rules of warfare I mentioned earlier. Want to know why we really needed them? The alien delegation looked like they really did not want to know. But Ambassador Lux, her skin now cycling through various shades of distress, nodded anyway. See, back in 1863, this guy named Francis Lieber wrote the first real code of conduct for warfare, the Lieber Code. Know why he did it? To prevent excessive violence. Nix Vaughn suggested, hopefully. Stone chuckled. Not exactly. He wrote it because soldiers kept coming up with new ways to fight that nobody had thought to forbid yet. It is like having kids. You do not think you need to specifically tell them not to eat soap until you catch them doing it. Your soldiers were eating soap? Protocol Specialist Miratel asked in confusion. No, that is just... Never mind. Point is, we did not write rules because we wanted to be nice. We wrote rules because someone would always ask, can we use disease as a weapon? Can we pretend to surrender and then attack? Can we dress up as the enemy and cause chaos? Security Chief Kroll's scales had gone completely flat. And the answer was, no. And technically no, but we still did it sometimes anyway. Then after World War I, everyone got together and said, okay, maybe we need some better rules. No more poison gas, no killing prisoners, no attacking hospitals. Basic stuff. These actions needed to be specifically prohibited. Ambassador Lux's voice had taken on a slightly hysterical edge. Well, yeah. If it is not expressly forbidden, some commander somewhere will try it. That is just human nature. We call it tactical innovation. Silak felt his face tentacles curl in horror. You needed formal conventions to prevent the use of poison gas and biological weapons and impending bullets and attacking civilian targets and a whole bunch of other stuff nobody thought about until someone tried it. Stone shrugged. The Geneva Conventions are basically just a big list of things someone did that made everyone else say, "Wow, that is messed up. Let us not do that again." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. So Riza spoke up for the first time. "Your rules of warfare are not preventative measures. Nope, they are reactive. Something horrible happens. Everyone agrees it was too horrible. We make a rule against it. Then someone finds a loophole or invents something new, and the cycle continues." Ambassador Lux had gone from transparent to a deep worried crimson. "Are you saying these conventions are incomplete?" "Oh, definitely. They're constantly being updated. Like nobody thought we would need rules about blinding laser weapons until we invented blinding laser weapons. Or rules about autonomous weapons until we started building killer robots. Your species," Chief Kral said slowly, "continues to develop new methods of warfare faster than you can regulate them. Now you are getting it." Stone beamed. "It is like a game. Scientists and engineers come up with new technologies. Military folks figure out how to use them creatively. Lawyers scramble to write new rules. Round and round it goes." The protocol specialist had given up taking notes and was simply rocking back and forth slightly. "But here is the really fun part." Stone leaned forward conspiratorially. "The Geneva Conventions only apply to signatory nations during declared wars, and even then they're all loopholes, like tear gas cannot use it in war, but police can use it on civilians. Make sense of that one." "Nothing about this makes sense," Ambassador Lux whispered. "Right. But wait until you hear about the space treaties. We have not even started fighting wars in space yet, and we have already got rules about not putting nukes in orbit or claiming planets for military purposes." Zilak's scientific curiosity briefly overcame his horror. "You created rules for space warfare before achieving regular space travel?" "Of course. Better to have the rules in place before someone gets creative, right? Though technically the treaty only bans weapons of mass destruction in orbit. Regular weapons are fine, and space-based kinetic bombardment, totally legal." "Kinetic bombardment?" Chief Kral asked, clearly regretting the question immediately. "Yeah. You know, dropping big metal rods from orbit. No explosives needed. Just good old-fashioned physics. Impact velocity does all the work. We call it the Rods from God program." The entire alien delegation stared at her in unified horror. "You weaponized gravity?" Nix Vaughn's third eye had stopped blinking entirely. "Sure, why not? If it exists, someone will figure out how to use it in warfare. That is just how we think. Always looking for the next advantage, the next innovation, the next thing nobody else has thought of yet." Ambassador Lux's skin had settled into a deep, worried purple. "Sergeant Stone, are you telling us that despite all these conventions, despite all these rules, your species continues to actively seek new methods of warfare?" "Well, yeah. That is kind of our thing. The rules just make it more challenging, more fun, you know." The room erupted into barely contained panic. The security chief's backup shield activated automatically. The protocol specialist fainted. Ambassador Lux's skin cycled through colors previously unknown to xenobiologists. And Zilak, he finally understood. They had not been studying a primitive species developing nuclear weapons. They had been studying a species so naturally gifted at warfare that they had to create international laws just to keep themselves in check. A species that saw those laws not as restrictions, but as challenges to overcome. Stone finished her coffee, apparently oblivious to the chaos she had caused. So anyone want to hear about the time we trained pigeons to guide missiles? 3 standard galactic days after their meeting with Sergeant Stone, the alien delegation gathered on the Enlightenment's command deck to finalize their report to Central Command. The diplomatic recommendation is clear, Ambassador Lux announced, her skin now a stable professional blue. We must establish peaceful relations with humanity immediately because they are a threat, Chief Kral asked, his new triple-layered security shield humming softly. No, the ambassador replied, because if we do not become their friends, they might start getting creative about ways to deal with aliens. Silak nodded in agreement. Their capacity for tactical innovation is unprecedented. Did you know I found records of them considering orbital mirrors as weapons? They plan to concentrate sunlight onto enemy positions. They wanted to weaponize solar energy. That is actually quite clever, Nix Vaughn mused, then quickly added, terrifying, but clever. Ryza, who had spent the past 3 days updating their threat assessment protocols, looked up from her data pad. Latest analysis suggests a 99.9% probability that if we do not establish diplomatic relations, they will interpret our absence as a challenge and develop entirely new technologies just to reach us. Agreed, Ambassador Lux said. The last thing we need is humans trying to figure out how to weaponize faster-than-light travel just because we made them curious. The protocol specialist, still slightly pale from their previous meeting, raised a trembling appendage. What do we tell Central Command about their military capabilities? The truth, Zilak said firmly, that we have discovered a species so naturally talented at warfare that they had to create extensive rules just to prevent themselves from getting too creative about it. And even then, they treat those rules more like guidelines for innovation. I suggest we classify them as threat-level friend immediately, Chief Kral added, only half joking. Ambassador Lux's skin rippled in agreement. The report should emphasize their potential for peaceful cooperation. After all, anyone who can think of using nuclear weapons for civil engineering could probably figure out some fascinating peaceful applications for our technology, Nix Vaughn finished, as long as we stay firmly on their good side. The final report to Central Command was sent that evening. It contained only 2 primary recommendations. 1. Immediate establishment of diplomatic relations with humanity. 2. Under no circumstances should anyone give humans any ideas about new ways to conduct warfare. As the transmission was sent, Zilak stood at his familiar spot on the observation deck, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. Riza floated up beside him. "Doctor," she said, "Sergeant Stone sent us one final message. Would you like to hear it? Do I have a choice? She says she enjoyed our chat and hopes we will visit again soon. She also attached some light reading material about something called the Strategic Defense Initiative. Apparently, they once considered using space-based lasers to shoot down nuclear missiles." Zilak's face tentacles curled in resignation. They wanted to use lasers to shoot nuclear weapons. Yes, she says it did not work, but, and I quote, "it was worth a try." They both stared at the blue planet in silence. "You know," Zilak finally said, "I am beginning to think we were asking the wrong question all along. We kept wondering how such a primitive species could develop nuclear weapons. What should we have been asking? We should have been asking what other weapons they tried to develop first that made nuclear weapons seem like a reasonable alternative." Riza's face tentacles writhed in horror at the implications. The observation deck fell silent again, broken only by the soft hum of engines and the distant sound of the security chief ordering a fourth layer for his personal shield. On the planet below, Sergeant Stone was enjoying another cup of coffee, idly wondering if the aliens might be interested in hearing about the time the Marines tried to train seagulls for naval reconnaissance. After all, if they thought the bat bombs were interesting, some rules, she mused, were just meant to inspire creativity.